Well, hello and welcome again, once again, to another week at the well. We're so thrilled to have you here today. Especially happy to have all our women here today, considering this is Mother's Day. I hope you all have a great Mother's Day. And I know it may not be the day you normally do. Things are different in our society right now. But we ask that you would make the most of it and know that you are appreciated. So at this time, gather your family around, bring the kids in. We have another clip this morning that is oriented for the family, so I ask that you would just sit there, take time to watch this and think about it, and let's have a great day together.
This story is taken from the Bible in Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. One day, Jesus was teaching about how people should be living now in his kingdom here on earth, knowing that one day all must come before God in his heavenly kingdom. He tried to explain through parable stories what both living in God's kingdom now and entering it in heaven will be like. Jesus explained with one parable. It will be like a wealthy boss that was getting ready to go on a trip. Before he left, he called his servants to come see him to put them in charge of his money. He only wanted to give them as much as he thought they would be able to use to earn more money, so he gave them each a different amount, expecting them to earn as best they could with what he gave them. To one servant he gave 5 bags of gold, then he gave another servant 2 bags. He only gave the last servant 1 bag. Then he set off on his trip. The man who had been put in charge of 5 bags of gold went out right away and put the money to work. Soon he had 10 bags of gold. The one with 2 bags of gold also worked hard to earn more gold. He ended up with 4 bags of gold. But the man with only 1 bag dug a hole in the ground and hid his boss's money. That's all he did. After a long time, the boss returned and asked the servants for his money. The man who had been put in charge of 5 bags of gold brought his boss those 5 plus 5 more. "Boss," he said, "you trusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have earned 5 more." His boss replied, "Good job. You are a good and trustworthy servant. You have done a good job with a few things, so I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share my happiness in my kingdom." The man with 2 bags of gold also came. "Boss," he said, "you trusted me with 2 bags of gold. Look, I have earned 2 more." His master replied, "Good job. You also are a good and trustworthy servant. You have done a good job with a few things, so I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in my happiness in my kingdom." Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. "Boss," he said, "I know that you are a hard man. You expect more food than what you planted. I was afraid of you, so I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is your bag of gold." His master replied, "You terrible, lazy servant. You did nothing with what I gave you except hide it. If you believed that I expect more than what I'd given, then you could have at least put my money in the bank. They would have paid at least a little interest for the money." Then he said to his other servants, "Take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever does something with what they have been given will get even more. In my kingdom they will have more than enough. But whoever does not do anything with what they've been given, even what they have been given will be taken back. If they do nothing, they'll have nothing. This man doesn't want to be my servant, so show him the door. He doesn't belong in my kingdom."
Okay, we're coming back into our series that we've been examining here, the series that we're calling The Path. If you remember, in the first week, we determined the fact that our direction, not our intention, determines our destination. So if we want to get to the correct destination, we have to watch what path we're on, make sure we're not getting off course. We have to make sure we look at for long-term results and not short-term, and avoid distractions and detours. But in the second week, we talked about what happens if we do get off course, and that happens at times because we're not perfect. We want to know how to make course corrections. So we want to learn how to monitor the path we're taking and how to get back on course. And last week, we talked about your heart matters. We talked about how one of the main reasons we can get off course is we start to do things we want to do. It's what's within our heart, our feelings. Instead of looking to say, are you pursuing the path that God has for you? And that's what we really want to be doing. So this week we want to focus on the reality of our own limitations and the importance of getting help along the way. We can't do it on our own, and I know we have made references to this in our previous messages, but we want to focus specifically on that concept today, that we need help, and we need to know where to get our help and how to look for it. We need to know that importance. So let's start out first with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we have together again today. We ask that you would bless this time. We ask that we would open our hearts and our minds and allow us to hear from you. And we ask that you would give us guidance and show us the things that may be wrong in our lives, our wrong perspectives, our wrong way of looking at things. And we ask that you would put wise counselors in our life that will guide us along so that we can stay on the path you would have us to be on. So we ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. All right, let's take a look at this intro video first, and then we're going to get into the meat of the material. All right, the title of this week's message is Getting Help Along the Way. You realize that one of the most difficult things in life to know is what you don't know. We're so busy gaining knowledge and all these things we know that we get so full of ourselves and we forget there's a lot that we don't know. Sometimes we have to break it down and figure out what we don't know, and sometimes it takes a shock. We're not ready to do that. One illustration I would have of that is when I entered the Marine Corps. I got on a bus and I went down to Parris Island. Now, they've learned after years of training here on Parris Island that all these young kids get there and they think they are pretty smart. They've got life all figured out. Hey, I've graduated high school. I'm ready to go. I'm pretty smart. And they say this is tough, but nah, I'm going to go in here and show them how tough I am. Well, they have a real good way of humbling you down there, because one of the biggest problems we have is that we think we know too much, and something has to come along to humble us, to get us to realize we're wrong. And that's what they do at boot camp. When you go down there, they break you down, they cut your hair off, they change your clothes, they march you all over the place. They tell you who you can talk to, who you can't, how you address people, and before you know, they have you so disoriented, because basically they break you down. They have to break your pride. They have to break your ego. They have to break you down. Why? So that they can build you back up the way they need you to be. And that's sometimes what has to happen in our lives. We need something that's going to break us down so that we can be built back up. Sometimes, whether it's in our job situations, our personal relationships, or even our relationship with God, we have to realize sometimes we got it all figured out. I'll tell you what, if you think you have Christianity and a relationship with God all figured out perfectly, you probably don't. That's one of the worst things you can do, is think you have it all figured out. We need to constantly strive for growth, and we have to start looking to find out what we don't know. So we're going to once again look and see what Solomon has to say for our need of counsel this week. First off, we find in Proverbs 15:22, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. What does it tell us in here? Well, if you have no counsel, your chances of failure are pretty high. You might get lucky, you might succeed in what you're doing, but when you try and do it on your own, you're doing it on your own limitations. But it also tells us here that many counselors increase chances of success. So what's going to happen is when you increase your chances of success when you involve others, and one of the questions you have to ask here is, would I have had greater success with more input? That's for those who do succeed on their own. Every once in a while you do something on your own, you think, yeah, it worked out for me. I guess I'm pretty smart. But what would have happened even if you didn't fall flat on your face, you did succeed? How much better could you have done if you had sought that wisdom? So how can you know what you don't know? You seek advice from advisors. Specifically, you seek the right advice from the right advisors. But why don't we do that? Why don't we seek advice? First reason's ignorance. Know-it-alls, thinking you have it all figured out. So we already think we know everything that we need to know. What we need to do is to change our perspective. We need to assume others know more than you. Huh? Yes, get over yourself. Assume others know more than you. That's how you learn. Commit to being a student rather than a teacher. Too many people want to take and go out and spout their wisdom and tell people what they know rather than just listen and absorb and say, okay, what do I know? What don't I know? Might I have wrong? What additional information can I gather? We need to commit to an attitude that states, I don't know everything. That's the first thing you have to admit to yourself. And then you have to say, some things I think I know could be wrong. I thought that's the way it worked, but what if I was wrong? I better do some more research and find out what the truth is. And always assume that there is more that you could learn. Nobody has learned everything. There's always more knowledge. The minute you shut down to learning more, you've come to a dead end. You're not going any further. So we always have to assume that there's more that we can learn. Second reason we don't seek advice is pride. We don't want to show any weakness. We already know what we need to know, right? And then it feels better to have people think we know what we're going to do than to let them know we don't have a clue. That's going to be embarrassing if people figure out that we don't know it all. So we've got to put on a show and show them how smart we are, right? Get over yourself. In order to learn and to grow, forget what you think you know and figure out what you don't know. The next reason why we don't seek advice is flat out laziness. It's too much work. The Bible calls this slothfulness. It's a word we don't use very well, but it's very descriptive. Sometimes we're just plain too lazy to do the work to seek advice, so we take the easy way out. Sometimes we make plans without counsel, and those often fail, or at least wind up being less effective than they could have been. Also, why do we avoid wise counselors? Why? Because it's easier to get advice from our friends. Why do I want to go out and look up those other people and all that when I've got people right around me? It's easier to just ask them. But many times, friends will simply tell you what you want to hear. They're trying to keep on good terms. They don't want you to tell you you're messed up or wrong. They're just going to, hey, no problem. Hey, yeah, you're doing good. Everything's fine. Oh, you got it all figured out. Sometimes they're not smart enough to know how to question you, but other times they just flat out, they don't want to make any waves and risk losing a friendship. So you need to ask yourself, is my friend really that knowledgeable in this area? Sometimes they're not. So getting advice from our friends is not always bad, but we shouldn't limit it to that. And we should be careful on that. Or we avoid wise counselors because it's easier to follow the herd. It's easier to go with the crowd than to take a stand for what is right. How about that? But think about it, as that saying goes, if everyone else walks off the edge of a cliff, are you going to follow them? I sure don't want to. Sometimes we have to make the stand and we have to do the hard thing. It's easy to just walk along with the crowd, but sometimes we have to separate ourselves from them and say, I'm not sure they're going in the right direction and maybe I better seek some outside counsel. And we also avoid wise counselors sometimes because it's just easier to copy what our parents did. Because we're growing up into adults, how many times we said our parents are nitwits or something worse, or we said they don't have a clue what's going on, and we're not going to be like them when we get older. But what happens? Get older and yep, we're doing the same things. Learn from your parents and their good ways. All parents have good ways, but nobody's perfect. And all those things you did not like and you realize may have been wrong, have the insight to recognize that and try and find ways to improve on those areas. Take from their good, but look for good from somewhere else to improve on those areas so you will pass a better legacy on to those who come after you. You don't want to be one of those people later in life that says, I hate it, but I turned out just like my parents. How many of you are saying that right now? So how can you know what you don't know? You seek advice from advisors. Specifically, you seek the right advice from the right advisors. Proverbs 1:5 we find, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. So what do we do to get good counsel? The secret to getting good counsel is knowing that you will always need good counsel. Recognize your need. Recognize that no matter how well you are doing, you still have not reached your true potential. And seek diligently to find God's plan for your life and fulfill it. And then, we want to ask more than one person's advice. Get multiple inputs. The more input you have, the better decision-making possibilities. Brainstorm with wise people. Play the devil's advocate. Definition of devil's advocate is to argue against or attack an idea, argument, or proposition, even if one is in favor of it, for the sake of debate or to further examine its strength, validity, or details. It's a good thing to do. I did that when I started my business. I started a business back in 1988, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to do this, and I found some basic information on how to start up a business. So I went around and talked to as many people as I could find about the business possibility. But what I'd find is that some people thought, hey, that's a good idea. That could bring good success. And others thought, no, this is a terrible idea. All these things could go wrong. No matter what viewpoint they took, I took the opposite. And if they said it was good, I'd say it's bad. If they said it's bad, I'd say it's good. Why? It brought up more information that I could weigh. So there's a lot of ways. I like brainstorming, talking to other people, even if I don't agree with all their ideas, but I try and think about them, and sometimes I find I agree with some of those other ideas, and I learn from it, whether it's a complete changing of my viewpoint or whether it's a molding of my viewpoint to come better out with it. So in Proverbs 11:14, we also find, for lack of guidance, a nation falls, but many advisors, not just one, many, make victory sure. And our third thing here on the secret to getting good counsel is not letting pride keep you from admitting what you don't know. Humble yourself. In Proverbs 13:10 we cite, pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Once again, get over yourself, humble yourself, and realize that there's a whole lot more that you don't know, and that way you become a sponge ready to soak up more knowledge. And then also in getting good, also along that same topic, we find that in Proverbs 12:15 we're also told, the way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. Solomon described that on that there, and it said, let's look and see what he's saying there. The way of a fool, another way to say would be, the path of a fool seems right to him. So think about these situations. So a friend comes and says, I'm worried about the direction you're headed. The fool would say, you don't need to worry about me. But the wise man says, really? I'm so grateful you'd care. Tell me what you're seeing. Or how about the dad who comes to his son and says, I'm worried about some of the habits you're developing. Well, the foolish son says, leave me alone, Dad. The wise son says, tell me what you're seeing. Yeah, I have a feeling that doesn't happen often enough. Or how about a mom comes to her daughter and says, honey, I think your behavior could get you into trouble someday. The foolish daughter says, Mom, you are so old-fashioned. The wise daughter would say, tell me what you're seeing. Or a supervisor comes to an employee and says, I know this is none of my business, but can I give you some advice? The foolish employee would say, it's none of your business, then mind your own business. The wise employee would say, I need all the advice and counsel I get. Well, I think that's a good answer on any of these topics or anything that comes along. I need all the advice and counsel I could get. We need to be ready to soak it up. If you want to see a good biblical illustration of somebody who did not follow wise counsel in the Bible, go to 2 Chronicles chapter 10 and read about what happened after Solomon died. Solomon, the wisest person supposedly to have ever lived. He has built this huge kingdom. It is full of wisdom. It's full of wealth. It is the center of everything. Everybody idolizes what goes on here. But when he dies, his son Rehoboam becomes the king. And so the Israelites come to Rehoboam and say, we will swear to be loyal to you and honor you as king, but could you do us one favor? Could you lighten up the load a little bit? Your dad really made us do a lot of work. So you got to realize Israel had become very wealthy, very successful, had built all these new buildings, but in order to do all of this, Solomon had had brought in a lot of his people and pretty much had them working almost on a slave basis. He was working them pretty hard, and they needed a break. And that's what they're asking for. So could we just slow down here a little bit? Well, Rehoboam seems to start out pretty smart here in the things he does. First off, he says, oh, come back and see me in 3 days. I want 3 days to think about it. Smart move. Don't rush into a decision. And then he does another smart thing. We talk about many advisors, right? Rehoboam consults 2 groups of advisors, and he gets 2 different answers from the 2 different groups. He goes to the older advisors who had all the wisdom and experience and had been with his dad all these years and been involved in building this great kingdom. And when he said what the people wanted, they said, that's a good idea. Lighten it up a little bit and you will have respect from them and you will have a great kingdom. And we think you should do that. He says, okay. Then he went to some of his friends. Now, these are the young friends. Keep in mind, the old wise counselors, they had nothing to gain from this. They already had been around for quite a while, had established their place. So they were giving good honest off of their experience. But the young guys, they're trying to get established here and getting good with the new king and everything else. So they say, I'll tell you what. Tell them that no way. If they thought your dad was tough, you're going to make it tougher. I'm going to increase the load on you. And 2 different things, and he had a decision to make. But Rehoboam chooses the advice of his young friends over the wise older ones. And so when the Israelites come back in 3 days, he says, you thought you had it tough before? Well, I'll tell you what. My little finger here is heavier than what my dad did to you. He says, I'm going to show you what real work is. I am going to increase your workload and you will obey me. Well, this didn't go over so well because the Israelites had been pushed far enough and they revolted and it ended up splitting the kingdom. And here's this young man, because of poor advice, he came into the richest kingdoms in the world, most successful, and he had it all handed to him on a silver platter, so to speak, and he blew it because he wasn't smart enough to follow good advice. So we want to look for advice in things we do and make sure it's good advice. Now, And know your objective if you want good counsel. Take counsel from those who have been where you want to go. Uh, so many times people look to those who are around them or look for advice for people who are on the same level, we're going along, oh, how's this working for you? I'm trying this. But they don't say, okay, I really want to get to this other level here. And I don't want to stay here. I want to get to here. So they're talking to other people that are at the same level as theirs rather than reaching up here and looking, say, this is where I want to go. Who do I know who's a good example? And let me go talk to them and get advice from this person. And that's something that's very important. Know who to bring in as a mentor, an advisor, and as a counselor. Go to somebody who you can learn good lessons from. So follow the advice of the smartest man who ever lived. It says, listen to advice and accept instruction, and in the end you will be wise. Solomon was known for giving out his wisdom as people from all over came. But I'll bet you what, I didn't sit there in Solomon's quarters, but I'll bet you at the same time he was sharing the advice and the wisdom and knowledge he had, I'll bet you he was listening to everything he could so that he could increase the knowledge. So listen and accept that instruction. So where do we go from here? We want to continue by seeking wisdom and strength and knowledge and God's guidance in our lives. So come back next week as we can study more, and we're going to continue on in this series. Continue to read from the books of Proverbs, a lot of good knowledge in there. Continue to suggest you join small groups wherever you can. Ours online. We just finished up the study we were doing. We are starting a new one this coming week. If you've not been involved in it because you didn't want to jump into a middle of a series, join us on Thursday night. If you're not already on our mailing list, get in contact with me through the links that are right below me here so that I can give you the information so that you can come and get on a Zoom session with us and we'll study the Bible together. We're going to be studying a couple books in the New Testament over the next few weeks, so we'd be happy to have you join our group. And ask God to show you the counselors He has for you. There are people with wisdom around who can help you grow, and all you'd have to do is reach out to them. They might refuse you, they might be in their own little world, but you will find that many wise, successful people are looking to share their advice, and they are willing to help you along so that you can reach your goals, and they'll be there to help you. Seek advice from someone who is where you want to be, not those who are traveling along with you, but look ahead. I could find a lot of good examples there. I heard a story a while back of Dr. Kevin Myers from 12 Stone Wesleyan Church, how he actively pursued getting a mentor relationship with John Maxwell, who was an experienced Wesleyan pastor and an expert on leadership, and he wanted to know how to be a better leader. So he specifically went to meet him and learn from him and chose him as a mentor so he could grow. What happened? He planted a church, and he took from a small church to where he is now the largest church in our denomination and one of the largest in the country. I think last year they averaged over 16,000 people a week in services. Why? Because he was willing to seek out and gain knowledge and find wise counselors to help him show him how he could get there. That's what happens if we reach out and find the right people. And then we want to continue to follow Jesus. It was often mentioned in the Bible. If you look up, Jesus said many times, follow me. Jesus is the wisest counselor we can get, so we need to follow his teachings. So I ask that you would have a great week. Hope you enjoy, ladies, enjoy this Mother's Day. Come back next week and we'll continue on from there. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we've had together today, Lord. We thank you for this guidance we've had on following paths. We ask, Lord, that you would put wise counselors in our path to give us good advice. And more importantly, Lord, allow us to have the discernment to weed through all the advice we're getting, because people will give us plenty of advice if we simply ask, but allow us to know which advice is wise and which may need to be discarded. But we ask that you would increase our wisdom and put us on the right path to accomplish what you would accomplish through our lives. I ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.